What's up, crazies? Kickstarter fans, indie comic fans, I got something for you. I have indie creators in the blue room. They're ready to talk to you about their Kickstarters. They either launched it or gonna launch. So if you really, really love indie comics and you want to support the little guy and see them win, well, here's an opportunity to prove it. Put your money where your mouth is. Check this out. I'm done talking. Now it's time for the indies. Let's start it up. Start it up, y'all. Start it up, y'all. Start it up, start it up, start it up, y'all.
Then finally, it's going to be Frank Martin. He's got a book called Polar Paradox. So we'll be talking to him on the show coming up in a few minutes. So check that out. Stay tuned. And definitely pledge, support your independence. Check them out. The links are going to be at the bottom of this. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and then go into their pages or go into Kickstarter and support them. But yeah.
All right. So welcome back to Cast of Craze, and we have a very special guest. His name is Frank Martin, and he is the writer of The Polar Paradox, and he has a Kickstarter coming up. And we're here to talk about the Kickstarter, but before we do, we want to talk about you. So, Frank, why don't you give us a little story about who you are and where'd you grow up?
Oh, hey, Sam. Thank you for having me. Who am I? My name is Frank Martin. I am from New York. I'm a comic writer and author, so I dabble in some novels, some prose, as well as comics. And I'm a little bit all over the place. I kind of tend to write what I like. So I like everything, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, some comedy, some drama, crime stuff. So I kind of bounce around depending on whatever's going on in my head.
All right, so what part of New York did you grow up?
I grew up in Westchester County, right outside New York City, where I still live, which, I really like it. I like living in the suburbs because I love New York City, but as my father says, my favorite part of the city is leaving.
Yes.
Yes. I like going in, getting my city fix, having dinner, seeing a show. It's things are a little trickier nowadays, but I like doing what I need to do, go to a Knicks game, and then head on home to the quiet suburbs.
Nice. So are you a single child? You have brothers, sisters?
I have one older sister. She's 10 years older than me, and she has 2 kids. I have 3 kids, so we love getting together for play dates and all that stuff.
Nice. So, as a kid, what were you into?
Oh, man. Yeah, like I said, my tastes kind of jumped all over the place. I recently started rewatching with my kids. I bought seasons 1 and 2 of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Remember that show from Snick?
Mm-hmm.
It was so, and as I'm watching it, I realized that this is like my inspiration, my influence as a kid, because it covers everything. They got episodes that are straight horror, monsters, serial killers, fantasy. They got some goofy, funny, silly episodes too. It kind of spans the gamut of just geek genre and culture. So I'm like, this is why I like everything, because from this show, and it was just kind of a blast to watch. So and I bounced around. I definitely watched everything. I remember when I was in 3rd grade, Starship Troopers came out, and I'm like, this is my favorite. This is my favorite movie of all time. I mean, I'm in 3rd grade. I don't really know anything, but my parents and my sister, they didn't really hold me back from what I was consuming at a young age. So, I remember my sister's 10 years older than me. She made me watch like Nightmare on Elm Street with her. So Freddy's my favorite slasher and all that. I really love everything.
So at what point did you start writing, and what was the influence that triggered that?
I don't know really what pushed me to write. I mean, every time when you're a kid and you're in elementary school, they always assign those creative writing classes, write a story. And all the kids were writing stories, and I really loved the assignments, and I just kind of never stopped. I remember my first story was it was like a Halloween zombie story. It was Halloween, and the zombies rose from the grave. And then I also wrote a story about time travel where I had a history test, and I had to go back. I had a time machine. I went back in time. My mom actually showed me the story that I wrote. I think it was like 1st or 2nd grade or something. But it just I never stopped telling the stories. I did what all young kids did when they like watching movies or TV shows and playing video games. They write fan fiction because they want to write for those characters.
Right.
So that's kind of how my creative storytelling drive flowed through. And then as I grew older, I wanted to tell my own original stories, and it was primarily prose. I was writing actual short stories and then novellas and novels. And at some point in time, my love of reading comics kind of collided with my love of writing, and I'm like, I could totally do this.
Right.
It wasn't that as easy as I thought it was.
Right.
I quickly learned that there's a steep learning curve, but I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and I'm having a blast, and I don't think I'm going to stop anytime soon.
So what was your first attempt at writing a comic book?
So my first attempt was, I think the big mistake comic writers and creators make is they think right off the bat they're going to go into their dream project,
right,
their magnum opus. I wanted to do kind of a 6-part superhero epic or saga. I think when we're reading books from Marvel and DC, they always revolve around 6 issues or 4 issues, but they have an arc, you know. And Marvel and DC can finance that relatively simple based on Batman and Spider-Man because they know people are going to buy it. But for me, who's never written a comic before, trying to put together a 6-issue story, it's kind of, you fall flat in your face, you know. But you need to go through that growing pain of failure to know what the right thing is. So from there, I kind of went back to basics, you know, short stories. That's really where you got to start with. 4 pages, 5 pages, 10 pages, whatever. And I enrolled in a comic class, and I came away with a short story that was about like a depressed angel that was drinking at a bar. You know the classic scene, you're depressed, you're drinking at a bar, you're telling all your woes to the bartender. Right. And the bartender in this particular story turned out to be Satan, turned out to be Lucifer, and he ends up being the crap out of the angel. Be like, how could you be depressed? And that I had a story, but you can't really do anything with a short story by itself. So I kind of took that urban fantasy angel demon theme, and I wrote other stories, and I eventually combined them into an anthology, and that became my first work, which was called Modern Testament, which was it was a great first foray into comics. Right. You know, it was a crash course. It took me a couple years to finally finish it. I think I kickstarted the whole collection, which was, at the time, it was 15 stories, 160-page anthology. Right. And in 2018, I really finished it. But it was great because it was like each story was its own individual project. It wasn't like 4 issues. It's the same story. I'm working with the same artist. Every single story was a different artist, different team, starting from scratch again. So I really got to cut my teeth on what it's like starting from scratch basically 15 times on all these 15 stories. Right. Nice. So did you ever attend a Comic-Con? I have. I've done a couple cons. It's really tough for me with work scheduling and my wife's schedule and on all the kids. It's really hard slipping away and doing a really hard con schedule throughout the year. But yeah, I've done a couple local cons. I think the biggest con I ever did once was at the time Modern Testament was being put out by a publisher in Chicago. So I was lucky enough they had a booth at C2E2. And I flew out there and I got to sell my book on the floor of a major convention. That was awesome. It was a great experience. And other than that, New York, I've been to New York Comic-Con a couple times. I had a couple cons. I really wanted to turn my convention appearances around in the great choice of doing it in 2020 when I managed one show in January. And it was a pretty cool show. I managed to sell a bunch of books, and then I was scheduled to do one in April, and everything kind of just fell apart from there. They pushed it back from April to September, and then obviously that wasn't happening. Yes, I know. So yeah, hopefully at some point in time, I would like to get back into the con swing of things, but that's kind of on hold for the foreseeable future. Right. So what have you ever submitted what was the first time you submitted your writing, and what was the feedback like? So with Modern Testament, it was very tricky because people don't typically like to publish. It was the first book. So the way I did Modern Testament was I did basically 4 issues of 3 stories apiece, and then I combined them at the end. But at the time, I wasn't doing a series. It was just basically a one-shot of 3 short stories. So it's kind of a weird thing. They don't really sell that. It was just kind of a way for me to put my stories in a completed book, and then after the fact, I'm like, okay, let's go try to publish this. And publishers are like, this is kind of weird, this is kind of quirky. It's very cool, great artwork, great writing, but it's not really marketable.
Right.
So I was running into some issues trying to get it published, and I was lucky enough to find, as I said, the publisher that ended up publishing it out of Chicago. They're no longer around, but they were an indie publisher, kind of a startup indie publisher, and they were looking for new titles. And I was lucky enough to get in on the ground floor with them, and that book, Modern Testament, was part of their first line of releases. And after he put it out, he said, this really has serious potential. Do you think you want to do any more? And I kind of wanted to, but I was on the fence on whether or not I was going to push forward with it.
Right.
And him saying, look, I'll publish them if you want to continue on with the series. That was enough to make me go forward with volumes 2, 3, 4. And then eventually I had enough for a full-blown trade anthology.
Nice. And so at what point did you start the Polar Paradox?
So as I was wrapping up that series, Modern Testament, I was kind of seeing what was kind of going to come next. I tried partnering with a bunch of artists, and my co-creator on Polar Paradox, Antonio Mastria, I actually met him at a con, kind of on a local con. He saw my work. He said, I'm an artist. I said, okay, let me get your email. Let's stay in touch. And I threw a bunch of ideas at him, and he really dug this one. And it was a great collaboration. He threw a whole bunch of different designs as far as what the characters should look like, what the creatures in the story should look like. And that's kind of how it came about. It was, the inspiration from it came from, I'm a big National Geographic reader. So they did a story that was pretty much strictly about what the book was about, and we could talk about more what that is later, but for the most part it was just me reading this National Geographic story and saying this would make an awesome comic book.
Nice. So how did you guys meet up, you and the artist?
It was at a convention, one of the local cons. It wasn't a big con like New York Comic Con, but more one of a regional con. And I was tabling, and he just kind of stopped by. He was attending. I don't think he had a booth, and he went to the Kubert Art School. I think they're out in New Jersey, I believe. And he said, I'm an artist, and I said, I'm a writer, and we hit it off and exchanged some ideas. And a couple years later, we got this book.
Nice. I mean, he did a fantastic job. The artwork is beautiful.
I agree. You don't really realize it until you're in the nitty gritty of putting the art together, how tough it is pulling off an underwater scene, especially an underwater scene that's in a place that's supposed to be devoid of sunlight.
Right.
So he really pulled it off, pulling in different light sources with his colors. He wasn't really sure. He colored it himself. I think he was a little hesitant on whether or not he wanted to do the colors. And I said, look, give it a shot and we'll see how it turns out. And I said, just keep going. It's awesome.
Yes. I mean, I really did a really amazing job in it. It makes you, for every panel you read, you stop and you appreciate the art. You just stare at the scenes, and he did a really good job at that.
Yeah, this particular story was more adventure driven rather than plot driven. You know, there's not a whole lot of dialogue towards the middle to the end half of the book.
Right.
It's just kind of it's an adventure that's moving forward on its own.
Right.
So it allowed me to keep the dialogue to the minimum and just let his art drive the adventure forward.
Which was a smart approach, because you're able to let the reader's imagination run wild. Because you're like, oh, what's happening? What, how they're going to survive? You see all these questions start coming in your head, and what's down there? Oh my, it's like, it's like, how are they able to, last this long? So all these things happen, and so I think sometimes less is more. And I think that's you nailed it, because you paced it well. I mean, you started off with, there's a mission, and then the risk factor, and then like the what if factor, and then like what the hell factor. So it's like what's going on? That's just layers to it.
Yeah. So just to talk about the premise of the book a little bit, it's a very simple premise. A bunch of scientists are exploring underneath in a sea in Antarctica that nobody's ever been to before, and they go missing, and a bunch of rescue divers are sent into after them to rescue them, and it takes place in the near future. So they got some cool futuristic tech and stuff. But for the most part, all this setup and premise is in the beginning of story, the first couple of pages. So those are the real plot-heavy pages, which is basically them, as you said, getting their mission,
Right.
understanding the risks, and from there, once they dive in, the dialogue is pretty much kept to a minimum. I just let them go on this adventure of going down into this uncharted territory beneath Antarctica, and let the creatures and the adventure that they're going on speak for itself.
Right, and I think that's the pairing with the artist. I think that also just amplified. It complemented the story. You know what I mean? So you were able to truly just play on your imagination because of the visuals. Had that, I mean, you know, because an artist can make or break a story, and I think he did a great job of complementing what you wrote.
Thank you. So yeah, the kind of, this book is not just like a sci-fi adventure. It's kind of also a sci-fi adventure mystery.
Right.
You know, I don't want to give anything away, but you see on the last page that there's more going on here.
Yeah.
So the first, it's a 2-part arc. Part 1 is heavy on the polar side, I guess, of the story as they go into the adventure, and then the second half would deal more with the paradox side, of the mystery side. So that's going to be coming where the story really comes in. So after you have this first issue, which I hope kind of hooks you with the adventure and the suspense, you'll be able to be more invested in the story as we go into issue 2, which will be coming out later in the year. Right,
and which is what's also fascinating is that you learn really quick. Don't get too comfortable with a specific character.
any specific character,
you know, because I'm like, all right, so who's going to make it? Yeah.
I mean, I like those stories where the stakes are real, you know.
Right.
So especially when you're reading something like anything from the big 2 with Spider-Man or Batman. I mean, yeah, we see them get beaten up, they take their licks, and but you know they're gonna pull through somehow, and in the end, even if they do die, you know they're not gonna be dead forever.
Right.
You know, so I like these original stories where stakes are definitely real, where you don't get too comfortable with characters. I mean, for all its flaws, something like Game of Thrones was so great because at any moment, no character is too important to get the axe.
Yes.
So I love that fact that there's no status quo in a story. You know, Marvel and DC are all about returning to that status quo. So when you have a story that kind of says screw that's not going to exist, it really makes you kind of flip the pages and sit at the edge of your seat because you really have no idea what can be thrown at you.
Absolutely. So what made you decide that you wanted to do a Kickstarter for this?
So I've kind of really gotten into the groove doing a bunch of Kickstarters. I think this will be my 8th.
Nice.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I did one 2018, I think, and then I think I did 3. So this will be my 7th. I don't know. I lost track. So 2018 was 1, 19 into 2020 I did 3, 7. So yeah, this would be my 8th. It's just a great platform, you know, for an indie writer, indie creator. It's really hard getting people interested in your book. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles you have to get over as a writer, creator, quote unquote entrepreneur. It's not the creation of the project. It's the selling of the project.
Yeah.
And you learn this real quick when you're tabling at a con, that people aren't there to listen to you. They're not there for your little indie book that takes place in Antarctica.
Right.
So getting them interested is such an uphill battle. And Kickstarter allows you to basically sit on a platform so that people be like, look, this is what I got.
Right.
And it allows you a medium to present your story, your sales pitch, your products, you know, pretty much everything. And it really combines all the different tools of selling, things like social proof when you see people the other people that are backing it. It gives you a limited time offer because it's not going to be up there forever.
Right.
All these things kind of combine into an event that really can elevate an indie product and make it more appealing to people. So I think people would be foolish not to take advantage of it. And as we see more and more with big name creators and publishers like Boom and Top Cow that are launching projects on there, it's really it's really been a boom, a blessing for a lot of people.
Right, right. So let's talk about some of the incentives and the benefits of backing your Kickstarter.
So I'm going to offer a digital tier for people that just want to get the book and just check it out. I've been recently offering a digital deluxe tier that offers a lot of kind of extra goodies. If you're a process junkie, you'll be able to see the script, some of the rough designs, some of the pencils and how the mint variation. So that would be a little bonus that people could get. I got a print copy. We're going to have a variant cover as well. Some prints are available. Also, Kickstarter does this cool thing every January, I believe, called Make 100. It's an event where they push creators to create an item and limit it at 100. So it could be really anything. Could be a button, could be a pin, and I like to take advantage of that and utilize that. So for this particular project, I'm going to do a face mask, kind of part of our times, where I took one of Antonio's scrap designs for the helmet that the divers use. He had a rebreather mask.
Right.
That's like a scuba. So I put it on the mask and it looks like a scuba diving mask, which is kind of neat.
Yes.
And that's going to be my Make 100 event item. So there's a bunch of cool stuff. We got some commissions on there if you want to grab an art commission or some original pages. And it's just a cool way to be a part of the project.
Nice, nice. And when is your official launch?
So it's going to be running for 3 weeks from January 12th to February 2nd.
And why 3 weeks versus an entire 30 days?
So I've been doing 30 days. My last campaign was 30 days. And I was comfortable with it, but you really you get that Kickstarter fatigue after a while. Yeah. It drags on, and you need to do something new every day. Right. You got to be doing something. You can't just sit back.
Right.
And for 30 days doing something new, it's just a mental stretch. So I think condensing it allows me to get, as weird as it may seem, it might allow me to do more in a shorter period of time. Just make it more exciting and noticeable. But there's also a practical matter to this. I got a lot of projects coming out. I plan on doing 4 launches. This is going to be my first doing 4 launches, 4 Kickstarters in a year. And so shortening the campaign will allow me to get to fulfillment quicker, getting the books out, and fit more in a year.
Right.
So I don't really launch a campaign unless a book is at least 90% done. So I sent you the book, it's 100% done.
Right.
So I'm not one of these people that start a campaign with 5 pages that are finished and saying, okay, now I got to go make the thing. So it's going to be boom, boom from one campaign, one book to the other. And I'm going to start fulfillment the day after the campaign ends. I really don't wait. So backers can get their books as quickly as possible.
Nice, nice. So what's the goal for the book when the Kickstarter's done?
What's the funding goal?
No, like where can, outside of the Kickstarter, where would anybody be able to pick up your book?
All right, so once all my books are available on my website, I have a store on there. It's frankthewriter.com. So once the book's finished and printed, I'll be able to load it up on there. So if you happen to miss out on the Kickstarter, it will always be available for you. Outstanding.
Now, are you planning on doing print on demand or?
For this one, no, I do. The reason I do a Kickstarter is I always overprint for, cons and signings, which right. I'm not really doing right now. But the reason I do a Kickstarter is always have a little bit of stock extra. I never fund just to fulfill a Kickstarter.
Right.
I always keep a little extra just to put on my store and to make it available to people.
Nice. Outstanding. And are you on, what are your social media locations?
So, same as my website. I'm very easy. I'm Frank the Writer.
Right.
So, all my social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook is at Frank the Writer. That's my handle for all 3.
And when this series is done, what's the next step for you?
So Polar Paradox, as I said, is a 2-parter. I'm planning on doing the first one in January. The next one will be launching in the summer. But in between, I'm going to be launching a project in the spring that's going to be called The Last Homicide, which is kind of a detective noir mystery, kind of a throwback to the old school kind of pulp kind of age of stories like Seven or Maltese Falcon. 2 detectives got a murder mystery kind of deal.
Nice. So now, I just want to touch on one thing you said earlier. You said that writing comics, there was a big learning curve. What was that curve for you?
So coming from writing prose, prose is a real raw connection between the writer and the reader. You know, you put words on the page, and those are the words that the reader is going to experience. But really, as a writer of comics, you're just a conduit telling your story through an artist.
Right.
So you really have to utilize that relationship and understand that you're not the main storyteller.
Right.
You know, the artist is the main storyteller. You're just kind of setting the artist up to tell that story. So coming to terms with that is a little bit of a hit. But also there's a difference between writing a spec script, like just writing a comic script, not knowing who's going to work on it. But if you're writing for a particular artist, as I did with the Polar Paradox, you know, the script is more than just a script. You know, it's a conversation,
right?
Because you're really talking to somebody. There's a face there that you're communicating to, and it's a back and forth, and it's you can throw inside jokes in there, and it doesn't have to be formal at all. So it's a little bit of a daunting experience because you're relying so heavily on somebody, but it's also a very informal experience because people aren't going to really be seeing your script, your panel descriptions. So
right.
it's a little bit of a throwaway in a sense.
Right. And writing comic books for an artist, there's a level of trust you have to have that the artist is going to be able to conceptualize your vision.
Absolutely. Comic writers and artists talk about that balance constantly because as the writer, we're coming up with the story. We have how things are supposed to look in our head. And artists, you have to kind of, it's a give and take between wanting the story to look how you imagined it and then trusting your artist to know what's best. So sometimes you gotta know when to push, be like, no, it has to look this way.
Right.
And you gotta know when to take a step back and say what you did is much better and you know what you're doing and I'm just a dumb artist. a dumb writer, I should say.
Right. Outstanding. So any last words you want to send out to the people who are watching?
No, just check out the Kickstarter. I know sci-fi is not for everybody, but you're into stuff like Lost in Space or old school adventure like Fantastic Four. At least give it a look because I think you'll dig it. Outstanding.
It's definitely worth it. You have to go and check this out. It's definitely a heart pounding read. It gets you in it, and you want to see what happens next. Especially that end when you see what you see. You the question is like, oh, how'd that happen? So
what's going on there?
Yes. It's like, wait, is that what I think it is? I think it's definitely worth it. I will have the links on the bottom of this YouTube episode. This is Frank Martin, and that is Polar Paradox on Kickstarter. January 12th is the launch date. Right?
Thanks, Sam.
Perfect.
January 12th.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
It's just it's not.
Crazy. Acquiesce.
No, I was talking about my friend Acquiesce. I met him. Say my name, right?
This is what you were thinking? Oh,
He described me. He said, I'm the...
What? Catch the Craze. You're listening to Catch the Craze. You're listening to Catch the Craze. To Catch the Craze. You are listening to Catch the Craze on Catch the Craze. You're listening to Catch the Craze.
Candy girl.